Welcome back to The Bearded Verdict. What you're about to hear is a story about celebrity, guns, social media, and a trial that divided Hollywood and America. It's a story about a young woman who was shot in both feet while walking away from a man, and then spent the next 3 years being called a liar on the internet. On one side, Megan Thee Stallion, Grammy-winning rapper, one of the biggest names in hip-hop. On the other, Tory Lanez, also a rapper, also talented. But on July 12, 2020, after a pool party at Kylie Jenner's Hollywood Hills mansion, something happened that would change both of their lives forever. Tonight on The Bearded Verdict, the shooting, the cover-up, the social media war, the trial that had everything, a reluctant witness, a $1 million hush offer, a lawyer who quit 3 days before closing arguments, and a verdict that left nobody happy. This is the case of the people of California versus Daystar Peterson, better known to the world as Tory Lanez. Let's begin. To understand why this case meant so much to so many people, you need to understand who Megan Thee Stallion really is. Her real name is Megan Jovan Ruth Peet. She was born in San Antonio, Texas, on February 15, 1995. Her mother, Holly Thomas, was a rapper who performed under the name Hollywood. Her father was in and out of her life. When Megan was 15, her father died. When she was 24, her mother died of a brain tumor. Megan watched her mother die slowly. She was holding her hand when she took her last breath. 2 months later, she was shot. She has been surviving her entire life. July 12, 2020. Los Angeles. The middle of a pandemic summer. The city was on edge. Black Lives Matter protests were still echoing in the streets. But inside the gates of a rented mansion at 9040 Viewcrest Drive in the Hollywood Hills, the party was still going. This was Kylie Jenner's pool party. The guest list reads like a who's who of young Hollywood. Megan Thee Stallion, fresh off her #1 hit, Savage, with Beyoncé, was there. To understand the stakes, Megan had just turned 25. She had the #1 song in America. She was on the cover of magazines. She was everywhere. Tory Lanez was there too. Canadian-born, raised in Miami and Toronto. Daystar Peterson was his real name. He was 20 years old. He had hits. Say It Love, LA Confidential, but he was always the underdog. The one who felt overlooked by the industry. Megan's friend and assistant, Kelsey Harris, was there. She was Megan's right hand. They had been friends for years. What started as a night of champagne, swimming, and celebrity networking ended with gunfire on a dark street. Here's where the stories converge. Around 4 a.m., Megan, Kelsey, and Tory left the party together in a black SUV driven by Lanez's driver, Jaquan Smith. Also in the vehicle, Lanez's bodyguard. 5 people in that car. Something happened in that SUV. Something that turned a night of fun into a nightmare. According to Megan's testimony, she mocked Lanez's musical talents during the ride. She said she wanted to get out. She felt trapped. The argument escalated. Kelsey Harris, according to testimony, was upset learning that Megan had been romantically involved with Lanez, a relationship Megan denied on the stand. The SUV stopped near the intersection of Laurel Canyon Boulevard and Viewcrest Drive. Megan got out. She started walking away. And then, according to every piece of evidence presented at trial, Tory Lanez leaned out of the vehicle and shouted 3 words that would become infamous. "Dance, bitch!" And he fired a semi-automatic handgun at her feet. Megan was struck in both feet. The bullets entered from behind. She was walking away. She fell to the ground. She couldn't stand. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. She crawled to a nearby driveway, bleeding profusely, leaving a trail of blood in the dark. The SUV sped off into the night, leaving her alone on the street. The tension in that SUV had been building all night. Witnesses at the party later described Megan and Lanez arguing by the pool. Something was wrong between them. In the vehicle, Megan sat behind the driver. Lanez sat directly next to her. Kelsey was on the other side. The driver, Jaquan Smith, would later testify that he heard the argument escalate. He heard Megan say she wanted to leave. He heard Lanez's voice getting louder. And then he heard the gunshots. A neighbor named Sean Kelly heard the shots from his bedroom window. He called 911. He described seeing a short guy, Lanez is 5'3", with a gun, firing multiple shots. But when police pulled over the SUV just minutes later, they made a decision that would haunt the case for years. They found Megan inside the vehicle with Lanez. She was bleeding from her feet. And Megan told them something that wasn't true. She said she cut her feet on glass. Why did she lie? She was terrified. It was July 2020. The country was on fire over police brutality. George Floyd had been murdered just 6 weeks earlier. Megan later explained it in a now-famous interview. I didn't want to die by the hands of the police. She was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Dr. Lee Hirano operated on her feet, removing bullet fragments. The medical records from that night are brutal. Megan suffered a through-and-through gunshot wound to her left foot. The bullet entered and exited. Her right foot had a bullet lodged inside that required surgical removal. The orthopedic surgeon testified that the trajectory of the bullets was consistent with a person walking away from the shooter. The entry wounds were on the back of her feet. The exit wounds were on the top. That detail alone disproves the self-inflicted theory that spread online. You can't shoot yourself in the back of both feet while walking away. The X-rays showed what the surgeon would later describe to the jury as foreign metallic bodies, still in her feet to this day. She had 7 pieces of bullet lodged in her feet. 2 in her left, 5 in her right. Here's a critical detail most people miss. The police report from that night. The responding officer documented that Megan had gunshot wounds to both feet, and that she identified the shooter as Daystar, Lanez's real first name. That police report existed before any media coverage. Before any lawyer. Before any Instagram story. But the public wouldn't know about that for years. 3 days later, everything changed. On July 15th, Megan posted, then quickly deleted, an Instagram story. She confirmed she had suffered gunshot wounds. She wrote, I suffered gunshot wounds as a result of a crime that was committed against me and everyone who was there. TMZ broke the story. But even then, Megan hadn't named Lanez publicly. The internet did what the internet does. It speculated, it memed, it turned trauma into content. Conspiracy theories spread. People said she was lying. People said she staged it for attention. The same people who had never questioned a gunshot wound before suddenly became ballistics experts. The media coverage was split along familiar lines. Tabloids like TMZ and Page 6 reported the facts. But on social media, the narrative was being written by people who had never seen the evidence. Bloggers with hundreds of thousands of followers speculated openly that Megan was lying. That she was protecting someone else. That she shot herself. Every time a new detail emerged, it was twisted. When Megan filed a restraining order against Lanez months before the trial, some interpreted it as evidence she was afraid of him. Others said it proved she was trying to ruin him. There was no version of events where the internet believed her. And here's where this case takes its first dark turn. Because instead of remaining silent, Tory Lanez did something that would poison the well of public opinion permanently. On September 25, 2020, just 2 months after the shooting, Lanez released a 17-track album called Daystar. The entire project was a public declaration of innocence, packaged as music. He rapped about the shooting. He mocked the idea that he could have done it. In the song, Money Over Fallouts, he raps a line that became a rallying cry for his supporters. How the F*** you get shot in your foot, don't hit no bones or tendons. It sounds like a good point, if you don't understand ballistics. The reality, the bullets entered the back of her feet while she was walking away. They passed through soft tissue between the bones. No bones were shattered because that's how gunshot wounds to the foot work when you're walking away from the shooter. The wounds were real. The bullet fragments were real. The exit wounds were real. And the surgeon's testimony would later confirm every detail. But the seed of doubt was planted. And it grew. The ballistics from that night tell a clear story. The gun was a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. 4 shots were fired. 3 struck the ground. 1 struck Megan, but it passed through her left foot and then hit her right foot. That's why she had wounds on both feet from a single bullet. The bullet went through her left foot first, then embedded in her right foot. The LAPD crime lab matched the bullet fragments to the gun found in Lanez's vehicle. The gun was registered to a friend of Lanez. His DNA was not on the magazine, but his DNA was on a shell casing found inside the SUV. On August 20th, Megan went on Instagram Live and finally named Lanez directly. Her voice shaking, she said, "You shot me, and you got your publicist and your people going to these blogs, lying. Stop lying. Why lie?" In October, she wrote a powerful op-ed in the New York Times. She wrote, "Black women are still being murdered, still being sexually assaulted, and still being abused. And no one seems to care." She performed "Protect Black Women" on Saturday Night Live. Her voice cracked with emotion. She was using her platform not just to defend herself, but to speak for every black woman who had been disbelieved. On October 8th, the Los Angeles County District Attorney filed charges. The charges: assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded unregistered firearm in a vehicle, and discharge of a firearm with gross negligence. The max sentence at that time, 22 years and 8 months. The legal machine was in motion. Now here's where this case stops being just a legal story and becomes a cultural phenomenon. Because what happened next wasn't in a courtroom. It was on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, on every podcast in America. 2 #armies formed. On one side, #I stand with Megan, survivors, black women's rights advocates, and fans who believed her from day one. On the other, #I stand with Tory, a coalition of people who either genuinely believed in his innocence, or who just didn't want to see another black man go to prison based on the word of a woman. The debate became tribal. You weren't allowed to say, "Let's wait for the evidence." You had to pick a side. And then the celebrities picked sides. DJ Academics, one of the biggest hip-hop media personalities, used his platform to amplify doubts about Megan's story. He hosted Lanez multiple times. He questioned why Megan didn't call the police herself, ignoring the fact that she was bleeding on a stranger's driveway. Drake, arguably the biggest rapper in the world, released a song with 21 Savage called Circo Loco. In it he raps, "This be asterisk 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 lie bout getting shots, but she's still a stallion." Megan's lawyer, Alex Spiro, responded publicly, "The ignorant continue to support her attacker." DaBaby invited Lanez on stage at Rolling Loud Miami, moments after Megan had performed on the same stage. This directly violated Lanez's protective order. His bail was increased. The judge was furious. 50 Cent posted memes mocking Megan. He called her a liar. He posted side-by-side photos of her looking happy. But here's where it gets interesting. After the trial, after the evidence was presented, 50 Cent apologized. He admitted he changed his mind. He said he had been wrong. And that's the thing about this case that doesn't fit the usual narrative. People actually changed their minds when they saw the evidence. Because the evidence was overwhelming. But it took 3 years to get to trial. And in those 3 years, the internet had already decided. Megan called it misogyny, a term coined by Moya Bailey to describe the specific intersection of misogyny and anti-black racism that black women face. She told Elle magazine, "It never crossed my mind that people wouldn't believe me. When the guilty verdict came, it was more than just vindication for me, it was a victory for every woman who has ever been shamed, dismissed, and blamed for a violent crime committed against them." Outside the courthouse, it was a circus. Lanez supporters heckled Megan as she walked in. "Why are you lying on that boy?" On the other side, survivor advocates held signs demanding justice. The parking lot became a battlefield of beliefs. December 12, 2022. 2.5 years after the shooting. The trial of the People vs. Daystar Peterson finally begins. Judge David Hereford presides. Deputy District Attorneys Alexander Bott and Kathy Ta represent the people. George Mdizian defends Lanez. But before we get into the testimony, I need to tell you about the lawyer who wasn't there. Because this detail tells you everything about the defense's case. Shawn Holley is a legal legend. She was on O.J. Simpson's civil defense team. She represented Michael Jackson's family. She's represented the biggest names in Hollywood. Lanez hired her. She was his first chair. She was preparing the case for months. And then, in emails that were later unsealed, Holley told Lanez something remarkable. She told him the Kelsey defense, the theory that Kelsey Harris was the real shooter, was not a viable strategy. She said there was no evidence for it. She said it would backfire. 3 days before closing arguments, Holley withdrew from the case. Ethical conflict. The reason, Kelsey Harris had alleged that Lanez, through Holley, tried to bribe her to change her testimony. Mdizian took over and ran the Kelsey defense anyway. The jury didn't buy it. The star witness, Megan Thee Stallion. She took the stand for 3 hours. Her opening words: "I can't believe I have to come here and do this." She described the argument in the SUV. She described hearing Lanez shout, "Dance, bitch!" She described the pain. The blood. The crawling to a stranger's driveway. She told the jury about the $1 million offer. Lanez offered to pay her to stay silent. She told them about the apology call the next day, when Lanez said he was just too drunk. He apologized but said he didn't remember pulling the trigger. And when the prosecutor asked her about her career at the time of the shooting, whether it was bigger than Lanez, she delivered one of the coldest lines in legal history. "I had just done a song with Beyoncé." Then Dr. Lee Hirano took the stand. The surgeon who operated on Megan's feet. He showed the jury x-rays with foreign metallic bodies still embedded. He confirmed these were gunshot wounds, not glass. He had been a trauma surgeon for nearly 20 years. He had never seen a foot injury from glass that looked like this. The defense cross-examined him for hours. He didn't waver. There was another moment in the trial that didn't get enough attention. Detective Tyler Duran of the LAPD testified about the crime scene investigation. He described finding a shell casing in Lanez's SUV. He described Megan's blood on the ground at the scene. The prosecution asked him, "Based on your training and experience, did this scene match a shooting or a self-inflicted injury?" His answer: "It absolutely matched a shooting where the victim was trying to get away." And then Kelsey Harris. The witness everyone was waiting for. The prosecution had granted her immunity. They needed her testimony. And on the stand, she was a disaster. Vague. Evasive. "I don't remember," became her mantra. She testified she loved both Megan and Tory. She didn't want to be there. But here's where the prosecution played their ace. Months earlier, in September 2022, before the immunity deal, Harris had given an 80-minute recorded interview. In it, she was clear. Confident. She said Lanez shot Megan. She said Lanez attacked both of them. The jury heard both versions. The tapes contradicted her live testimony. And that was enough. Kelsey Harris's testimony was the most painful part of the trial. Not because of what she said, but because of what she couldn't say. She was Megan's friend. She was there that night. She saw what happened. But she was caught between loyalty to Megan and fear of the consequences of testifying against Lanez. The 80-minute tape painted a clear picture. But on the stand, she couldn't look at Megan. She couldn't look at the jury. She stared at the floor and said, "I don't remember," until the prosecutor had to play the tape back to her. The defense tried to create reasonable doubt with DNA evidence. Lanez's DNA was not found on the magazine of the gun. Testing on the gun itself was inconclusive. But here's what the prosecution said: bullet fragments from Megan's feet don't need DNA. The surgeon's testimony, the x-rays, Megan's testimony, the 911 call, the totality of evidence was overwhelming. The defense also argued that Megan's blood alcohol level that night was high. That she was drunk. But the prosecution pointed out, being drunk doesn't make bullets appear in your feet. And let's talk about that 911 call. Sean Kelly, the neighbor. On the stand, he waffled. He said he never saw a gun. The defense used that confusion. But what the jury also heard, Kelly described seeing a short guy with a gun. Lanez is 5'3". That detail never changed. December 23, 2022. The jury deliberated for 7 hours over 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. Guilty. On all 3 counts. Assault with a semi-automatic firearm. Possession of a concealed unregistered firearm in a vehicle. Discharge of a firearm with gross negligence. Tory Lanez was taken into custody immediately. His bail was revoked. And for the first time in 2.5 years, Megan Thee Stallion, and every woman who had been watching this case, felt the system work. But the case wasn't over. Not yet. Sentencing would take another 8 months. Lanez hired new attorneys, including Jose Baez, famous for getting Casey Anthony acquitted of murder. They filed a motion for a new trial, arguing ineffective assistance of counsel. Judge Hereford denied it. They filed another motion. Denied again. And then came the victim impact statement. I've read hundreds of these. This one was different. Megan's statement was read in court by the prosecutor. She wrote, "Since I was viciously shot by the defendant, I have not experienced a single day of peace. He not only shot me, he made a mockery of my trauma. He tried to position himself as a victim and set out to destroy my character and my soul. Today, I beg this court to send a message to every victim of violence and fully hold the defendant accountable. This is a statement for all survivors, that their lives matter." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense team didn't speak. The defense presented their mitigation. Lanez's father, a Christian minister, choked up describing the death of Lanez's mother when he was just 11 years old. The mother of Lanez's son described him as the most supportive father. There were over 70 letters of support, including one from rapper Iggy Azalea. Lanez himself addressed the court. "If I could turn back the series of events that night and change them, I would. The victim was my friend. The victim is someone I still care for to this day." On August 8, 2023, Judge David Hereford delivered his sentence. Prosecutors had asked for 13 years. The maximum was 22 years, 8 months. The defense asked for probation. Judge Hereford sentenced Tory Lanez to 10 years in state prison. His words: "Sometimes good people do bad things. Actions have consequences, and there are no winners in this case. And that's the line that haunts me. No winners. Because he's right." Megan has permanent scars, physical and emotional. She still has bullet fragments in her feet. Tory Lanez will likely serve most of those 10 years. He's currently incarcerated at California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi. But the debate about this case didn't end with the sentence. It got louder. The social media war had a real-world cost. Megan lost endorsement deals. She lost opportunities. She has spoken openly about how the harassment affected her mental health. In her documentary, Megan Thee Stallion, in her words, she broke down describing the death threats she received. The messages telling her to kill herself. The people who showed up at her events with signs calling her a liar. She said, "It's like they want me to disappear. Like because I'm a black woman who speaks up, I should just vanish." She didn't vanish. She got louder. The sentence of 10 years was a compromise. The prosecution wanted 13. The defense wanted 0. Judge Hereford landed in the middle. Under California law, Lanez will serve at least 85% of his sentence before he's eligible for release. That means he'll serve about 8.5 years. With credit for time served, he could be released around 2030. But his behavior in prison matters. The stabbing in 2025 may affect his security classification. It may affect his parole eligibility. Nothing about this case is simple. What happens to a celebrity in California State Prison? Lanez was sent to the California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi. It's a medium-security facility in the mountains north of Los Angeles. Unlike the celebrities you see on TV, Lanez doesn't get special treatment. He wears the same uniform. He eats the same food. He lives in a cell. The stabbing in May 2025 changed everything. He was attacked in the yard, according to reports. 14 stab wounds. 2 collapsed lungs. He spent weeks in the prison hospital. He now lives in what's called administrative segregation, effectively solitary confinement for his own protection. Whether that's better or worse than general population is a question only he can answer. Lanez's legal team filed an immediate appeal. The arguments: unfair testimony, ineffective counsel, prosecutorial misconduct. In November 2025, the California 2nd District Court of Appeals issued a 46-page ruling rejecting every single claim. Their conclusion: any mistakes made would not have changed the guilty verdicts. He filed 2 habeas corpus petitions. Both denied. In February 2026, the California Supreme Court, the highest state court, refused to review the case. His state appeals are effectively over. Federal appeal is still possible. He could file a petition for writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. But the odds are astronomical. The Supreme Court hears fewer than 1% of petitions filed. And then, on May 12, 2025, something that shocked even hardened observers. Lanez was attacked at California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi. He was stabbed 14 times. 7 wounds to the back. 4 to the torso. 2 to the back of the head. 1 to the left side of his face. 2 collapsed lungs. He was airlifted to a hospital and put on a ventilator. The suspect, a convicted killer serving a life sentence. Lanez survived. But the attack left him with permanent physical damage. He has filed a $100 million federal lawsuit against California corrections officials for failure to protect. Whether he'll see a dime of that, or whether this was just another chapter in a tragedy that keeps writing itself, remains to be seen. In January 2025, Megan was granted a 5-year restraining order against Lanez. She alleged he was orchestrating a harassment campaign from prison, coordinating with bloggers to spread defamatory content. The judge reviewed the evidence and granted the order without hesitation. And through it all, Megan kept winning. More Grammys. More number ones. Her album sold millions. Forbes estimated her earnings at $13 million in 2022 alone. She launched her own production company. She became a New York Times best-selling author. She became a symbol not just of survival, but of thriving in the face of a system that tried to tear her down. The Megan Thee Stallion case changed how we talk about celebrity trials. Before this, cases like Rihanna and Chris Brown set a pattern. The woman is disbelieved, the man's career continues, and the public moves on. But Megan refused to move on. She refused to be quiet. She refused to accept injustice as the price of fame. She turned her pain into purpose. She launched a nonprofit. She advocated for survivors. She became the voice that she herself needed to hear on that dark street in July 2020. This case also exposed a darker truth about the music industry. For years, hip-hop has had a complicated relationship with violence against women. Lyrics that glamorize it. Videos that sexualize it. And a fan base that often makes excuses for it. But Megan Thee Stallion forced a reckoning. She used her platform to say, "I am one of you. I make this music too. And I am telling you that what happened to me is not okay." She performed "Protect Black Women" on SNL with tears in her eyes. She made it impossible to look away. This case became a referendum on belief. On who we choose to believe and why. Study after study shows that Black women's reports of violence are taken less seriously than those of white women. A 2020 study from the National Women's Law Center found that Black girls as young as 5 are perceived as older, less innocent, and more likely to be lying than their white peers. Megan Thee Stallion was 25 when she was shot. She had already been through more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. And still, half the internet called her a liar. That's not about evidence. That's about bias. So what do we make of this case? Legally, it's straightforward. A man shot a woman while she was walking away. There was overwhelming evidence: the testimony, the X-rays, the 911 call, the witness, the motive, the cover-up. The jury deliberated for 7 hours on 3 felony counts, and came back unanimous. But the cultural case, that's still being argued. This case exposed something uncomfortable about America, that even when a black woman is shot, even when the bullets are still in her feet, even when a jury says guilty on all counts, there will still be millions of people who don't believe her. Not because of the evidence. Because of who she is. Because she's a black woman with a loud voice and a big personality, and the audacity to succeed on her own terms. Megan Thee Stallion said it best. "I don't want to call myself a victim. I view myself as a survivor. The guilty verdict was a victory for every woman who has ever been shamed, dismissed, and blamed for a violent crime committed against them." Tory Lanez is in prison. He'll be eligible for parole after serving half of his 10-year sentence. That's around 2028. He may yet file a federal appeal. The legal saga isn't guaranteed to be over. But the message of this case is already written. It's not complicated. It's not gray. Don't shoot people. And if someone tells you they've been shot, especially if they're a black woman who has everything to lose by speaking up, maybe, just maybe, believe them. This has been the Bearded Verdict. I'm your host. If you or someone you know has been a victim of gun violence or domestic abuse, resources are available at RAIN.org and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Subscribe. Share. And before you go, let me leave you with this. 2 years before she was shot, Megan's mother made her promise something. She made her promise to finish college. And Megan kept that promise. In 2021, while the world was calling her a liar, while she was preparing for trial, while she was grieving her mother and healing from bullet wounds, Megan Thee Stallion graduated from Texas Southern University with a Bachelor of Science in Health Administration. She walked across that stage with bullets still in her feet. That's who this case was about. I'll see you on the next case.